With the first overall selection in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan. Obviously, the big elephant in the room is Travon Walker. That's the guy that Trent Baalke and the Jags will have everybody thinking has a chance to be the first overall pick. I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. I can't get behind it. There's no way that you can convince me that Travon Walker is not only the best player in this draft, but a top 3 player in this draft. You just cannot convince me of that. He does fit what they want to do defensively, but so does Aiden Hutchinson. And who has the better, the better opportunity to play and be effective on this defense from day one? To me, that's Aiden Hutchinson. And you have to get a difference maker with this pick. You absolutely have to. They have to get after the quarterback. K'Lavon Chaisson's just not that guy. Bit of a bust. He never really fit this defense anyways. Hutchinson fits this defense like a glove, in my opinion. Mike Caldwell comes over from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It fits what he wants to do. It fits what I think Caldwell will want out of him. And again, you just cannot convince me that Travon Walker is the best player or a top 3 player in this draft. Look at the ancillary stats there, his rush percentage, things like that. Even his sacks. He has these splash plays and he has all the traits, but you can afford it. When he took Aldon Smith, Trent Baalke I'm talking about, when he took Aldon Smith and guys like that, it was a little later in the draft where, people can't fault you for it. He's already on the hot seat. He's already being called a clown and all this kind of stuff by his own fan base, so they're going to run out of patience with Trent Baalke if he continues to basically sabotage himself is really what it looks like to me. This is a guy that I think Doug Peterson will like. He would fit in the old, 4-3 defenses in Philly. So I think that this just makes too much sense, and you cannot convince me that Travon Walker is going to be the guy, and then we'll see where he ends up. So there you go. First overall, Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan. With the second overall selection, the Detroit Lions select Ahmad Sauce Gardner, cornerback from the University of Cincinnati. So I think the Lions will be picking up the phone, hoping somebody calls. Maybe they're even making calls, trying to make a trade here, something like that. But, who's going to trade up and for who? It just doesn't make sense this year with this year's draft. It's very much just to pick the best player available. Maybe you fill a need. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're just picking the best player on your board, sort of a thing. And that's the way that I see a lot of teams picking in this year's draft. And for me, Sauce Gardner might be the best player in this entire draft. I'm a massive fan of what he can do. I think he would fit every single NFL team fit in. He's got Jalen Ramsey on speed dial, giving him pointers in the Super Bowl and things like that. He's a local guy. He's from Detroit, grew up in Detroit, doesn't drink, doesn't party. He works hard. He's gonna be that hardworking, knee biter, ankle, that Dan Campbell is always talking about, right? He's gonna be one of those guys. And like I said, he grew up here. He's a local kid. He's gonna have he's going to be an immediate favorite amongst the fan base. Absolutely. Three interceptions in each of the last 3 seasons, never allowed a passing touchdown. Jeff Okudah, that's where people get kind of hung up on this because they drafted him 3rd overall a couple years ago. Hey, I get it. You don't want to keep sinking all this capital into one position, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy and he hasn't exactly been, the stud that they drafted him to be. Will he turn into that? Potentially. Jerry Jacobs played well for this team last year. He just had ACL surgery. So there's 2 big injuries to 2, I wouldn't call Jerry Jacobs a big time player or Okudah for that matter, but they're big pieces of this defense. So you slide in Ahmad Gardner right now and he plays with Amani Oruwari. Man, and then if Jeff Okudah gets back to full health, Tracy Walker comes back, that defense is looking, pretty formidable, especially against the pass. So, in a division where you have Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins is back with the Vikings. They might add a weapon, things like that. You need quality corners. In today's NFL, you can never have too many good quality corners. And in my opinion, Sauce Gardner is the best one in this draft and maybe the best player in this entire draft. So they hang on to the pick a local kid. He's going to make a difference from day one. Sauce Gardner to the Detroit Lions. With the third selection, the Houston Texans select Kayvon Thibodeau from Oregon, pass rusher, defensive end. You know, there's no need to really get cute here, in all honesty. There's a lot of people, pretty much everybody, even myself, originally had Kayvon Thibodeau going to the New York Jets. Sorry, that's where I originally had him going. But, you know, why, you know, just because you know he's a good fit and you know they like him and everything like that, and you maybe want him to go there, doesn't mean it's going to happen. You know, this guy fits what Lovie Smith likes to do to an absolute T. You know, there's no need to overthink it with the first two selections. You know, you have to get after the quarterback. Lovie Smith's Tampa 2, you know, it's not quite that anymore exactly, you know, the way it used to be in the old days, but he still relies on his defensive line to get after the quarterback and wreak havoc. And this is very much potentially the best pass rusher in the entire draft. He could be the best player in the entire draft, but certainly he's right there with Aiden Hutchinson, and maybe, and for a lot of people, they would put him ahead of Aiden Hutchinson. So there's just really no need to overthink this thing. Just go ahead, pick the best pass rusher in the draft. You know, you pair him up with Jonathan Grenard, and you make your secondary's life a lot easier. And they still have that 13th overall selection. Maybe they trade back. Obviously, keep watching, but maybe they trade back, but they're going to get a difference maker there. You know, let's just don't overthink this thing. Do not. There is interest there from the Texans, obviously. You know, there's no state taxes. You know, Caleb is all about that stuff. So, you know, I think he'd be a good fit here. I think it makes sense. I think Lovie Smith likes him. He would like him. And it just makes tons of sense. He said that he would like to play in Lovie Smith's defense. There's just no need to overthink it. And, you know, people that make mock drafts, again, including myself, originally I had him going one pick later just because I know that he's a good fit, and they would, you know, but why would the Texans pass up on him? Why? You know, yeah, they need some offensive line help a little bit, but you know, you can't pass up on a guy like this who could easily be the first overall selection, could easily be the best pass rusher, could easily be the best offensive player, and could easily be the best overall player in this entire draft. Don't overthink it. Houston Texans select Kayvon Thibodeau, third overall. At number 4, the Jets select Akeem Ekwonu from North Carolina State. Offensive tackle. Obviously, they just took, you know, Mekhi Becton, and George Fant has played very, very well for this team last year. We know Joe Douglas, the general manager, is an offensive line guy. They want to build it from the trenches out, sort of a thing. They could definitely use a pass rusher. Obviously, you know, Trayvon Walker might be a thought here. Kayvon Thibodeau went one pick before them, so they didn't get a shot at him. Jermaine Johnson, it's a little too early for him. Do you trade back? I just go ahead and take, you know, what might be my left tackle of the future. Mekhi Becton had, it was I think it was a dislocated kneecap or something like that in week 1 of last year. Didn't play another game. You know, he had a timeline of about 4 to 6 weeks. You know, his trainer would dispute that, obviously, but he had a timeline of about 4 to 6 weeks. Let's call it 8 weeks. You know, let's call it 12 weeks. He should have been back at some point. That's concerning for me. Very, very concerning for me, especially, you know, with a rookie quarterback. You know, you have a building offense, sort of a thing. And, you know, Mekhi Becton is a big, big boy. Like, injuries like that might linger, might reoccur, things like that. I'm concerned. I am. So I go ahead and pick, you know, in my opinion, probably the left tackle of the future. And then, you know, George Fant's still there. Obviously, he's probably not happy. I know he's not happy, but he's probably not happy with this pick either. It just depends on where Mekhi Becton's health is at. But realistically, like, I just shore up my offensive line, and I'm precautious here. This is a cautious pick. You have another first round selection, tons of draft capital in the second round. You know, there's lots of talk about them making a move for Deebo Samuel, but this pick is going to stay with the Jets. And for me, I invested in that offensive line, keep my franchise quarterback upright as much as possible. You know, you got Elijah Vera Tucker last year. Like I said, Becton and Fant are still there. They got a couple interior depth guys, but, you know, it just makes tons of sense. Grab this guy. It's going to help the run game. And yeah, there you go. That's all it is there. You know, it's a protect your quarterback and get after the opponent's quarterback league. That's what it's all about. And this, you know, shores up one of those two things. And like I said, we know that Joe Douglas is all about that offensive line. So there you go. At number 4, the Jets take Ike Ekwonu from North Carolina State. With the fifth selection, the Giants select Evan Neal. No trades yet. Maybe people are making some calls, but I still don't think that the draft capital you'd have to give up would be worth it to grab some of these guys here. So yeah, they grab Evan Neal from Alabama. You know, he played right tackle a little bit. There's ties for Brian Dable to Alabama. You know, he was probably part of the recruiting team that brought Evan Neal to Alabama at that time, and they need offensive line help. So I know that Matt Peart's there. I like Matt Peart as well. Andrew Thomas, obviously a former 4th overall selection a couple years ago. He had a good year last year. I don't mind Matt Peart, like I said. You go ahead and select Evan Neal. Let them have an open competition for right tackle, or just say, hey, Evan Neal's our right tackle. And then Matt Peart can slide in at left guard because Max Garcia and Shane Lemieux are just not it. And then you complete your line and you have a very good offensive line. And, you know, with all of the Kadarius Toney talk, this team's going to have to run the ball a little bit. You know, give it to Saquon Barkley, let him prove it. You know, he's going to be wanting a new contract, so get him the offensive line to do it. And then there you go. You're set for the next, you know, however many years at offensive line, and it'll just make this entire team better. So again, just don't overthink it. This might be the number 1 tackle in the draft, even over Ickey, who went, one pick ahead of him here. But this might be the most complete, the most pro-ready offensive lineman in the draft. So it's a plug-and-play starter at 5. You really can't complain if you're the Giants, in my opinion. So there you go, Evan Neal from Alabama to the New York Giants. With the 6th overall selection, the Carolina Panthers select Charles Cross, offensive tackle from Mississippi State. So the Panthers get kind of lucky here. You know, I do think that the Giants like Charles Cross. I do think that they like him and have every intention of picking him if necessary. I think that at the end of the day, if they can get Evan Neal, and in this mock draft they go ahead and pick him there. And, you know, Cross doesn't fall too far. He falls to the next pick. And I think that the Panthers get a little bit lucky here, and they just can't screw this up again. They really, really can't. They have to select him here. They really, really do. You know, they brought in Bradley Bozeman. They brought in Austin Corbett. They invest in this offensive line, but you got to finish it up here. You got to pick this kid, have him be your left tackle for the next 10 years. Brady Christensen and Cam Irving can compete for the left guard position there. Probably Christensen. He's young as well. You know, have those two compete, and this finishes your offensive line, and then you have a pretty quality offensive line, which the Panthers have not had in God knows how long. It's just been atrocious, and you can't keep it up. You know, Sam Darnold, you know, this team started 3-0 last year. Yes, it was bad teams that they beat. I get all that. But you can give Sam Darnold an opportunity. You bring in Baker Mayfield potentially, and you have those two guys, you know, play it out to say, you know, which one of you wants to play here again? Which one of you wants another contract? One of you guys have the opportunity to take this job and run with it. They're both still young enough to be franchise cornerstone quarterbacks. It's just one of them's got to show it. So that's what I do. You know, you get the Browns to take a little bit of the salary for Baker Mayfield, and you send a 6th round pick, 4th, maybe tops, absolute maximum 4th round pick, but it's probably more like a 6th, and they eat some salary, something like that. You have those two, Darnold and Baker, compete. You have your O-line shored up for your running backs. They're going to do a little more power running with Chuba Hubbard and Deontay Foreman coming in, and then obviously Christian McCaffrey doing his thing. They have all the tools and all the weapons and everything like that they need. It's just quarterback and left tackle where there's a massive black hole, and they can fill one right here, and then bring in Baker Mayfield. Bring in Baker Mayfield, have an open competition with Sam Darnold, and see which one of the two guys runs with it, and take it from there. The NFC is weak this year. It's very, very weak. You could get definitely into the playoffs, I think, with 10 wins. And I think that the Panthers can get there with the defense that they have. And if they make this selection and just shore up that offensive line and stop fooling around with it, you know, invest in it, get it done, and give your team the best opportunity to win. So there you go, 6th overall, Charles Cross to the Carolina Panthers. With the 7th selection, the New York Giants grab Derek Stingley from LSU, cornerback. So there's a lot of people that think that he could be the number 1 corner in this draft. I mean, I definitely do not think that. I'm a massive fan and believer of Sauce Gardner, so I have him, you know, kind of head and shoulders as the number 1 corner. But he's definitely up there. Everybody likes him in this draft. This is no reach whatsoever. You helped out the offense at number 5 with Evan Neal there. If you watched my draft prep episode and team needs and everything like that, I talked about this team potentially picking a wide receiver. And I still think that that's very, very possible. We're a few days, almost a week before the draft here. So a lot can happen. And if Kadarius Toney does end up leaving and they do move on from him, which seems more and more likely, they could go wide receiver here. But personally, I don't. I would rather just go with Sterling Shepard, Galladay, and Slayton. Let those guys tough it out, and then get a wide receiver later in the draft as well that can chip in. I don't go wide receiver this high with the team that I have with the Giants. They're going to rebuild. I like everything that they have going on, and they're going to want offensive players for sure with Brian Dable and Mike Kafka. But it's just too early to do that when you can get a guy like Stingley, and James Bradbury's being thrown around there for trade bait and everything like that as well. Adoree Jackson is your only other corner there, really, and then it's Darnay Holmes, stuff like that. So I think, and Logan Ryan's gone, so I think they're going to have to shore up a little bit of the back end of that defense, help themselves out. You went offense with the first pick technically, and then you go with a corner here and address wide receiver needs as well as probably running back, a backup running back later in the draft. So there you go. It's a relatively easy pick for me. Again, I don't think teams are picking up the phone quite yet to make a trade for potentially a quarterback, or Trayvon Walker's still slipping, so we'll see where he ends up. But there you go. With the 7th overall selection, the Giants select Derek Stingley, LSU. All right, we got our first trade alert here. This is the trade alert. If there's going to be trades in this mock draft, they're going to show up right here. So 8th overall, the Atlanta Falcons trade 8th overall to the Pittsburgh Steelers for 20th, 84th this year, and then a 1st next year and a 5th next year. Basically, I took kind of the cost that it took the Bears to move up from 20 to 11 last year with the Giants. It's pretty close as far as, the numbers are concerned. I changed a few little things. Obviously, I added the 3rd. I think it was a 1st, 4th, 5th. 2 firsts, a 4th, and a 5th. So pretty close as far as, the numbers and what the values would be. And I think it makes sense. Obviously, I'm not a massive fan of Malik Willis. If you watch a lot of my episodes and stuff, I'm not a huge believer in him. But the Pittsburgh Steelers are absolutely massive believers in Malik Willis. He's a phenomenal kid. Absolutely. He's a great leader, looks like, and he just needs some seasoning. The big problem, the biggest problem I had with Malik Willis was, he just didn't look good on tape. He had a lot of bad tape, but that wasn't always necessarily his fault. That offensive line was terrible, horrible at Liberty, and he didn't have a ton of weapons around him. So realistically, he was trying to do too much on his own. So if he sits for an entire season, he learns how to play quarterback in the NFL, and then he comes in 2023 as the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Maybe he's a different player altogether, and he's 100% the number one quarterback in this draft. That wouldn't surprise me one bit, but we'll see how that all shakes out. Again, he doesn't have to start this year. You got Mason Rudolph backing up Mitch Trubisky. I think Trubisky's the starter this year. He doesn't have to play unless there's an injury to both quarterbacks. Realistically, if Mitch Trubisky gets hurt, and that's the guy I have the starter, if he gets hurt, you turn to Mason Rudolph, and you're still potentially a playoff team. This is still a very, very, very good defensive team. And then with some upgrades on the offensive line, those guys just had to play. Those young kids just had to play, and they did, and they got some experience, and I'm sure they improved. So I think with how much they're going to run the ball and play defense, I think that this team could potentially be a playoff team with Mitch Trubisky. And then, like I said, Malik Willis comes in 2023. I can't remember the GM's name off the top of my head, but he's publicly stated that he's going to make sure that this team has a quarterback for the future. He's on his way out. He's moving, he's retiring or whatever it is after this draft. This is his final draft. And he's stated publicly, we are going to leave this franchise with a quarterback moving forward. And I think this is the sweet spot. 8th overall, maybe 9th with the Seahawks, but I think the Atlanta Falcons have so many holes, and they're a bad team. They're going to look to trade back, add some capital. Like I said, they get that 1st round pick next year where they might think about a quarterback. They're obviously going to have a bad record as well. There's a lot of good quarterbacks in next year's draft. So, the Steelers get theirs now. And again, this might be the number one quarterback when it's all said and done, but we'll see how it shakes out. There you go. You got your first trade. The Pittsburgh Steelers move up and select Malik Willis from Liberty. Spice alert, with the 9th overall selection, the Seattle Seahawks select quarterback Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati. So yeah, I'll probably take some heat for this one, but I really don't care. Again, it's not my first rodeo, as you all know. Leave it in the comments. Let me know what you think. But the fact is, this is the only quarterback that they brought in for a visit. Why do you do that if you have zero intentions whatsoever in selecting him? You know, it just doesn't make sense why you would go ahead and bring him in, get to know him a little better, things like that. And, you know, supposedly has a detailed plan about how he's going to beat out a veteran quarterback in training camp to win a starting quarterback job. Again, if you watch this channel a lot, this is my favorite quarterback in the draft. I think that, you know, right now he has the second highest floor, but the second highest ceiling as well. So, you know, I think he's right there with Kenny Pickett as far as, you know, who's ready to start NFL games right now today. Kenny Pickett's my number one. Then I'd go Desmond Ridder. And then as far as ceiling is concerned, I'm going Malik Willis and then Desmond Ridder. So, you know, he's right there on both accounts. You know, 4.5 40. He's not everything that Russell Wilson's not, but it's close. You know, he's 1, 2, 3 reads, and then, you know, if it's not there, he'll check it down or throw it away. And he's a smart kid. You know, he's a smart quarterback. And to be honest, like, people are dogging him for God knows why. I really don't know why. This kid is a winner. He is an absolute winner, and that's all that matters in the NFL. That is it. You know, people are comparing him to Alex Smith like it's a bad thing. You know, I have no idea why you'd say that's a bad, you know, comp. You don't want to be compared to Alex Smith. That's silly to me. So, you know, I'm more than okay with that. And, you know, again, the Seahawks don't seem like they think they're rebuilding for whatever reason. Do I agree? No, absolutely I do not. I think that they are a rebuilding team. And personally, I'm not sure if I would make this if I was this team. This is just what I think is going to happen. You know, it doesn't make sense for them to bring him in and then just for fun. You know, maybe unless they're bringing him in for Alec Pierce and Jerome Ford or something like that. But, you know, that just doesn't make a ton of sense either. So, you know, that's what I think they're going to do. And then you have an open competition in training camp. You know, I think everybody, especially even Seahawks fans, would know that Drew Lock, Geno Smith, and Jacob Eason are not that guy. And they're certainly not going to be that guy next year. So this is the guy, you know, you can sell it to your franchise and to your fans and to the players in the locker room that we think we're a winning team. We think we're a quarterback away from being, you know, where we were with Russ. And then this is the guy that's going to take us there. Again, do I agree? Not necessarily, but I do really, really like Desmond Ridder. I think he's ready to start in the NFL. Maybe not quite, you know, week one. You might just throw out Drew Lock in week one, or Geno Smith. Don't write him off because he started some games and had good rapport with DK Metcalf. But, you know, they're going to have to absolutely address the offensive line and make that better, especially if it is for a rookie quarterback. But there you go. That's just what I think is going to happen. You know, they could be fielding some calls for a trade, but I just don't think any team's trading up for a quarterback. You know, Trayvon Walker's still sliding, but, you know, I think it's warranted. So there you go. At number 9, Seattle Seahawks go ahead and pick their quarterback of the future, their next franchise quarterback, in Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati. Starting to get to double digits, 10th overall, the New York Jets select Drake London, wide receiver from USC. So I think that this is the wide receiver that they go with. It's no secret that they've been looking for a wide receiver. They try to trade for Tyreek Hill, things like that. And it might not make sense that they take Drake London because he is nothing like Tyreek Hill, but that's kind of the point. You know, you got Elijah Moore. I think that they kind of regret the Corey Davis signing. I don't think that he's going to be there, you know, too much longer. This might be his final season. And then, you know, Denzel Mims, we'll see what happens there. But I think with this guy, you know, Zach Wilson has a little bit of gunslinger in him. He's got a little bit of, you know, just make a play for me wide receiver sort of a thing. He's got a little bit of that in him. And, you know, with this guy, he's very much like Mike Evans. If you have one-on-one on the outside with Drake London, exact same thing that the Buccaneers do with Tom Brady and Mike Evans. If they're one-on-one on the outside, throw the ball there. Every single time, throw the ball there and let him make a play. Back shoulder, whatever you got to do, sideline, you know, throw the ball and Drake London's going to make a play. That's how I feel about it. I think that, this kid is ready to play in the NFL right now, as long as his ankle is healthy, and I'm sure it is. He didn't run the 40, but realistically, I'm not concerned. And I think that was very much by design, not only because of the injury, but also, look at what happened to Trey Burks when he ran a 4.55, which is not slow whatsoever. But, if he goes out there and runs a 4.6, what's going to happen to his draft stock? So, I think that it was by design, and it made sense to not run. I'm not concerned with the 40 time whatsoever, and clearly neither of the Jets. So they go ahead, grab their wide receiver to pair up with a guy that's complete opposite from him in Elijah Moore, and you got your wide receiver, you got your offense for the future kind of a thing. With the shorn up. I always say that word wrong. Offensive line with Icky at number 4. You go ahead and get some offense here, and then wheels up for your offense. And Zach Wilson, you're gonna find out what he is. You're gonna find out if he's your franchise guy really fast. So 10th overall, New York Jets select Drake London. With the 11th overall selection, the Washington Commanders select Garrett Wilson, Ohio State wide receiver. So give me a break on the logo there. I know it's different. It's just give me a break, man. They had 3 different logos in 3 different years, so it is what it is. But it's obviously the Washington Commanders. This will be a trivia question. Who was the first draft pick by the Washington Commanders? There you go, Garrett Wilson. It's no secret that they love their Ohio State wide receivers. They got, Carson Wentz, arguably the best quarterback that they've had in a long time on that roster, and they're going to give him an opportunity. They have a quality offensive line. They have a very good defense. They've got a couple decent running backs. You go ahead, get Carson Wentz some actual weapons. Not that Terry McLaurin is not, but you hope that Curtis Samuel's fully healthy. Ohio State, Curtis Samuel, Ohio State, Scary Terry, and then you bring in another wide receiver that can blow the top off of defenses, hit him on those slants and let him go. And then you got, like I said, Curtis Samuel underneath. Scary Terry can do a lot of the same things that Garrett Wilson can. And then you got some jump ball tight ends in Logan Thomas, and then, pass catching backs in Antonio Gibson, JD McKissick. You got Jared Patterson there as well to spell those guys. You got, draft capital later on where you can add another running back, because I know they've been bringing in quite a few running backs. So there you go. I think that this is the wide receiver that they end up taking. Not that I agree with it, but it's just what I think they end up doing. So 11th overall, Garrett Wilson to the Washington Commanders. With the 12th, believe it or not, overall selection, the Minnesota Vikings select Trayvon Walker, defensive end from Georgia. So at the end of the day, you just cannot convince me that this guy's a top 3 player, a top 5 player in this year's draft. You just cannot convince me of that. The numbers just don't back it up. If you want to draft on traits, you're going to get yourself fired. And this is right where he probably should be going. And Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, hopefully I'm saying his name right, the new general manager for the Minnesota Vikings, he's a smart guy. I'm pretty sure he's Ivy educated. He's been through the Patriots, I believe, system. He's a smart guy. He knows what's going on here. And I think that Trayvon Walker is a smokescreen. I really do. And I think that, this is where he probably should go. He's going to fit what they want to do defensively and makes lots of sense. So yeah, sit pat, and then if he falls to this point, then it's no brainer. I do think that it's possible that the Vikings trade down, but if this guy's here, then I think they grab him. Obviously, they're one of the only teams that aren't in the top 5 to visit with Trayvon Walker, and that says a lot in itself, in my opinion. Why are you visiting with him if you have, you do not think you're going to get him? Again, I think he's a smart guy. I think he knows that this year especially, there's going to be a lot of smoke thrown around out there, and he just sits and waits, and he gets the guy that he thinks he can get at the pick that he's at. So there you go. Number 12, Trayvon Walker from Georgia to the Minnesota Vikings. Much like the last selection, I do expect Kyle Hamilton to slip a little bit in the draft here. So with 13th overall selection, the Houston Texans stay where they're at, and they select Kyle Hamilton, safety from Notre Dame. Yeah, I just think that he slides. I really do. I don't think that it's worth it to take him in the top 5. And then after that, he's just going to slide a little bit. And the Houston Texans pounce all over it. I think they're answering the phone to some phone calls for teams that want to trade up here. But at the end of the day, they just can't pass up on drafting, a guy that's going to be a mainstay on their defense and to help out the back end of that defense, for years to come. And then the Texans make two big splashes on the defensive side of the football. New head coach Lovie Smith is a defensive guy, obviously. So I think that he's, just jumping up and down with joy at these two draft picks that the Texans end up getting. They have a ton of capital already, so I could see a trade back. But again, they have all these picks, and if you have these difference makers here ready to play from day one, and you can't pass up on it. You just can't. And they're throwing darts. The later the draft goes, second, third, fourth round, the smaller the target gets, if that makes sense. And Kyle Hamilton, he's one of the best players in this draft. He really is. And for him to fall this far is actually kind of crazy, but it's just the way that I see things kind of playing out. Again, we could see some trade up opportunity, but I think the teams that are picking before this, guys have either slipped or they like their guy too much to pass up on them. And then that's just what it is. No team's willing to give up, a first and a second or something like that to move up with their first, later in this draft, to move up and select their guy, or Kyle Hamilton in this case is who I'm talking about. But there you go. That's just kind of how I figure it's going to happen. I think he's going to slide a little bit. This isn't crazy. His betting line is 10.5, which is, I think, right where it should be. So the Houston Texans really bolster their defense. They get two quality difference makers from day one. They get Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame. With the 14th selection, the Baltimore Ravens select Jordan Davis from Georgia. This is a big boy. I could see a couple other things happening here. Trevor Penning has been rumored to the Ravens, but they just signed Morgan Moses. Or Moses Morgan. I can never remember honestly which name comes first with him, but they just signed him to be their right tackle. I think that he'll be more than fine. He's quite quality. And then obviously Rodney Stanley on the other side there for the next however many years. So I don't think it's as much of a need as and maybe that's a little bit of smoke screen trying to get guys to bite on him before. So who somebody falls, whatever. I could see them trading back potentially as well. But I think that, why do I see them trading back? Potentially for a Michigan player. Obviously, Mike McDaniel was the Michigan defensive coordinator last year, moves up to Jim Harbaugh's brother John Harbaugh's team, and is the defensive coordinator for the Ravens. But I think this is a bit of a compromise pick with him. He saw this guy in person when Michigan played Georgia in the college football playoffs. This is a big boy who can do some bad things. And, much like Vita Vea, Haloti Ngata back in the day for this team, I just think it makes a lot of sense, especially with a guy like Calais Campbell, who's, towards the end of his career. He's like a coach on the field. And for guys like this, Justin Madubuike, he could pass that torch. And this could be, like I said, that Vita Vea of this offense, or this defense, sorry. So, yeah, I think it makes tons of sense. And again, you got to keep that defense rolling. And, they were very, very, very good against the run. I think they were number one in the league against the run last year. But you got to keep that up, especially, like I said, with Calais Campbell likely moving on. Michael Pierce comes back. But, you got to invest. Derek Wolfe might retire. So you got to invest in this defensive line. They could go edge rushers. So like I said, David Ojabo is a Michigan guy. You could see that. But this is too early to take him. So I think, we could see a trade back. I just couldn't see any reason for any team to trade up in this position. So, they're hoping the phone rings. I don't think it does, and they end up selecting Jordan Davis from Georgia. With the 15th selection, the Philadelphia Eagles select Jameson Williams, wide receiver from Alabama. So people might think this is a little late for him. You're not necessarily wrong, but a guy like Justin Jefferson fell into the 20s in his draft year. Was that insane? Yes, absolutely, but it is what it is. It happened. It's not out of the question, especially coming off a torn ACL, especially considering he didn't produce at Ohio State. Yes, there's a stacked room, but this guy, if he's the best wide receiver in this draft class, why didn't he produce at Ohio State. I'm not saying that that's what I believe. I'm just saying that that's what people, I have heard some scouts and GMs have said about Jameson Williams. You throw in that torn ACL to end the season last year, and you could see him slide a little bit. The Philadelphia Eagles are in really no rush. Go ahead, get healthy. We'll be here waiting. We're a playoff team. This team went to the playoffs last year. They're gonna push for the division, in my opinion, this year. And obviously it didn't work out with Jalen Reagor. That was a terrible, terrible, terrible draft pick, in my opinion, at the time, and it's still now. You hit with Devontae Smith, so you go back to the well with Alabama, and you select their new wide receiver 1, and you plug him in as soon as he's ready. Like I said, you're in no rush. You have another pick and a couple selections here at, I think, 18. We'll get there in a minute or two here, but you have another first round selection. You have some depth. You got another first round pick next year from the Saints, right? So you're no hurry. You're in no hurry to get this guy on the field whatsoever if you're the Eagles. And he comes in and he becomes your, at the very least, wide receiver 2. You kind of have a 1A, 1B with Devontae Smith. And then, it's going to be a much better offense for this team this year. They need a weapon. They absolutely need a weapon. And Jameson Williams can be that guy, whether it's, in week 4, week 6, whatever it is. When he comes in, when he's ready, they'll be ready. And they're not going to miss a beat without having him in the lineup for the first, however many games it is. Or if it is if he misses any games, because his progress supposedly is coming along very, very quickly, faster than John Mechie, and he tore his ACL after John Mechie. So it's an interesting situation, but that's what I think happens here. It makes tons of sense. You're in no rush. Get on the field when you're ready, and we'll be a playoff team. So at 15th overall, Philadelphia Eagles select Jameson Williams. With the 16th overall selection, the New Orleans Saints select wide receiver Chris Olave from Ohio State. This is another team that absolutely needs a weapon. Mike Thomas has to play for this team this year. He absolutely has to play, or else I don't know what's going to happen with him there. It doesn't make sense. He has to get on the field. They go back to that old well again, Ohio State wide receiver. This might be my favorite wide receiver in the entire draft. He's very, very smart wide receiver. I love his route running. I love, again, his smarts. He just literally outsmarts corners and defenders, and he can do a lot of things. I think that he's not a slot receiver. I think he's an outside guy. I think Mike Thomas is more of a slot receiver than Chris Olave is. Jameson Winston, still the quarterback there right now. We'll see how that shakes out. They obviously have another pick and a couple selections here, but I think that, they go ahead and grab a weapon that they absolutely desperately need. The defense is still more than good enough to keep this team in games and potentially get them to the playoffs, but they have to add some weapons and get this offense rolling. It was obvious that they struggled offensively last year, especially after Winston went down with that torn ACL. So they go ahead, grab another weapon. Hopefully Mike Thomas is on the field again, and Jameis Winston is potentially your guy. So there you go, 16th overall, Chris Olave to the New Orleans Saints. With the 17th overall selection, the Los Angeles Chargers select offensive tackle Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa. So this is, I talk about my favorite players. This is probably my favorite offensive lineman. The dude is an absolute beast. He's a bit of an animal. Watches horror movies before game days to get in the mindset to go out and, kill, sort of a thing is what I would imagine, so get into character. And if you watch the Senior Bowl, especially the practices, man, this guy finishes people even in practice. So, I don't think he's going to miss a beat heading to the NFL from playing a lot of FBS type of opponents. This dude had a 99 point something PFF run grade. Yes, it's at Northern Iowa, so peel that back to 90 at say Alabama or something like that. Like, this guy is an absolute stud and he's ready to go. There's an absolute hole on this right side of the offensive line for the Chargers. It's actually at guard. Storm Norton was fairly admirable last year as their right tackle, but I think if you can kick him inside, have Trevor Penning move to right tackle, and then Brendan Hymus becomes your swing interior guard guy, and this offensive line is fantastic for a team that might push and might think about winning the Super Bowl. I think that has to be absolutely within the realm of possibilities for the LA Chargers. They just have to shore up that offensive line. I thought they might have to trade up to get this guy, but I think he's going to end up sliding to them right here. I think his over-under on the betting lines is 16.5 or something like that. So this is really right where he's supposed to be going, the sweet spot sort of a thing. I thought he might trade up to get ahead of the Ravens, but ultimately I just don't think the Ravens go ahead and grab this guy. It doesn't make tons of sense for them. There's a couple other teams that could use him later on in the draft as well, but again, I couldn't find a trading partner that would have made sense for them to want to trade down. So there you go. The Chargers, much like last year when they got Rashawn Slater, I had the Vikings trading ahead of the Chargers to grab Rashawn Slater, but they stayed where they were, and they got the number one tackle in the draft last year. They might be able to do the same thing this year. The only issue I might have is he's never played right tackle. I'm not saying that he can't do it, that's for sure. Maybe he's going to be a better right tackle than he is left tackle. Hard to say, but either way, I think at the very least, you're going to get a very quality run blocking right tackle that's going to improve and get the job done. So there you go. That's what I think they do, and I think they're jumping for joy at 17th overall. The Chargers select Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa. 18th overall, the Philadelphia Eagles are back on the clock, and they select George Karlaftis, defensive end from Purdue. I know they like this guy. They've met with him multiple times. He didn't quite have the college production, but Purdue wasn't a very good team this year. So, but his pass rushing percentages were there. They were up there with the best in this whole draft class. He's a big, powerful pass rusher, a type of a guy that the Eagles like to have on their roster. Derek Barnett, this is the final year of his contract, and he hasn't gotten there. He just hasn't gotten to that point. So we'll see if they end up bringing him back. Brandon Graham's toward the end of his career, and it's likely the last year for him. Josh Sweat's another guy that's on the roster. So these two guys are probably the future at defensive end for this team. They got an offensive player in Jamison Williams, and with their previous pick at 15 it was. And then here you go. You add to the defense. Again, I think this is a playoff team and one that's going to push for the division title. So you got to add some pass rushers and get after the quarterback at a little higher of a clip than they did last year, especially considering all the talent that you think you might have. But if they're just not working out, it's time to move on. And again, Derek Barnett is the whole thesis of this pick is Derek Barnett just not working out. And, maybe it's time to replace him. Maybe this pushes them to have a Pro Bowl type of a year. Either way, it's a win-win for the Eagles. So I think it's, again, it's a guy that they've met with a lot. They really like. I think he fits what this team likes to do. I think he would fit in well with this team. So there you go. At 18th overall, the Philadelphia Eagles go ahead and grab George Karlaftis from Purdue. With the 19th overall selection, the New Orleans Saints on the clock again, and they grab quarterback Sam Howell from North Carolina. This might be a little bit spicy for a lot of people, but at the end of the day, I can't remember if it's this pick or their earlier pick that they traded with the Eagles for, but I don't think they make that trade unless they're taking a quarterback now. Jameis Winston's coming off the torn ACL, and we're never sure if he's the guy. Looking at his contract, it doesn't state that they're ready to commit to him to being their guy. Andy Dalton's a good quality veteran leader that can help mentor this young quarterback. And yeah, I just think that they see too many traits that remind them of Drew Brees. I think that they look at this kid and say that could be Drew Brees 2.0. That really could be. And I can't fault them for that. I'm not the biggest fan of Sam Howell. He's my quarterback 3 in this year's draft behind Desmond Ridder and Kenny Pickett. But that's also, I do give a lot of merit to whether or not they're ready to start in the NFL right now. And I do think that Sam Howell could be that guy. He had a lot of fairly bad tape last year. His numbers were always there for this team, for North Carolina I'm talking about. 30 plus touchdowns, I think, in every year, passing in every year, including as a true freshman. The kid's only, I think, 21 years old, so he's very, very young. You don't have to have him start this year, but I think he's capable, and if he ends up being that guy, then he's that guy and start him. And at the end of the day, I think that this Saints team just has to invest in the offense with some young rookie talent. They have to invest in it. And with Dennis Allen taking over, he's sick of his defense having to win ball games. And that's what it's been with the Saints for the last few years is, off of the back of the defense. defense. And I think he's going to be okay, even as a defensive guy, saying, hey, we got to invest in this offense. So there you go. They go and grab Chris Olave. They grab Sam Howell. They have some draft capital later in the draft to plug some other holes that they may need. But there you go. There's your offense, for the future. You couple that with Mike Thomas and Alvin Kamara. Hopefully Taysom Hill can do some things as well. You're not going to lean on this kid like, other teams might for rookie quarterbacks, depending on the year and everything like that. But there you go. I just think that they see too much Drew Brees in this kid to pass up on him. I do not think they make the trade that they did, trading next year's first round pick for a first round pick this year without leaving the first round with a quarterback. And I think that this is their guy. So 19th overall, Sam Howell from North Carolina. Some more spice for you. With the 20th overall selection, the Atlanta Falcons select Treylon Burks, wide receiver from Arkansas. So you can see the details of the trade. Obviously, this is the back half of the Pittsburgh Steelers trading up to grab Malik Willis. And, I don't think anybody's really talking about this, and I don't see why, if I'm being honest. Arthur Smith's obviously in Atlanta now. What is a comp that a lot of people are giving for Trey Burks? A.J. Brown. Who did, Arthur Smith bring in? A.J. Brown. Relatively local guy, right? Mississippi is right beside Arkansas. What's right beside Mississippi? Georgia. My U.S., I'm a Canadian, so my U.S. Geography might not be exactly on point, but I know that he's relatively local to Georgia, and I think he would fit in with a team like that and a system like that. It all makes sense. They need a wide receiver. It might be a little bit spicy, but it makes tons of sense, and I do not think anyone can disagree with me on that. You got Kyle Pitts and now Treylon Burks, plus they got a guy by the name of Cordarrelle Patterson, who everybody knows about, everybody's favorite running back darling, sleeper fantasy guy last year, who does a lot of the same things. Like, one of the best tweets and quotes I've seen in a little bit was, Cordarrelle Patterson was Deebo Samuel before Deebo Samuel was Deebo Samuel, if that makes sense, right? Like, I love that because it's very, very true. And what's another guy that people are comparing Trey Burks to? Deebo Samuel. It's all like, it makes tons of sense, especially if the Falcons can trade back here and grab them at 20. They pick up some capital. They get a first round pick next year for a quarterback. You have all the weapons in the world now waiting for your future quarterback. So they're going to be a bad team. There's tons of talent in next year's draft to grab your guy of the future. So there you go. Let me know what you think in the comments on this one. It might be a little spicy, but it just makes too much sense to not have it happen if a trade like this takes place and takes shape. So there you go. 20th overall, Treylon Burks to the Atlanta Falcons. 21st overall, the New England Patriots select Trent McDuffie, cornerback from Washington. So this was one of the landing spots that I had in mind for Treylon Burks back in, realistically, it was like November when I started thinking about it. Thought he'd be a great fit, but obviously he went one pick earlier to the Falcons, and obviously losing J.C. Jackson, they have a massive need at cornerback. There's a couple guys here, there's Andrew Booth, there's Kahir Elam, there's Trent McDuffie, obviously, who I have them taking, Kyler Gordon, his teammate potentially, but I just think that Trent McDuffie is the most NFL ready of all of those guys, to be honest with you. He comes from obviously DBU, the new DBU, Washington, and supposedly he gets along great with Bill Belichick in their meeting. He's a very, very smart kid. He can diagnose, a little bit of short arms, but it's not like he's T-Rex out there, so it's not the end of the world. He's fast. I think he'll fit in. He can do coverage, man, whatever you need him to do, and I think he'll fit in very well with this defense. And I think with the division that they're in and the way things are moving, especially in the AFC, but also the AFC East, I think it makes sense that they absolutely have to grab a cornerback specifically. Daxton Hill's another guy on a lot of people's tongues, which, that's not a bad pick there either. But this is, I just think that this is at this point in the draft, the most NFL ready cornerback available. So they go ahead and scoop him up. There's no reason to overthink it. There you go. Trent McDuffie, 21st overall to the New England Patriots. With the 22nd selection, the Green Bay Packers select center Tyler Linderbaum from Iowa. So this is very, indicative of what the Packers have been doing the past few years. Elton Jenkins, was drafted as a center. Josh Myers last year drafted as a center. Tyler Linderbaum drafted as a center. Obviously, it's not that they're just trying to turn it over, trying to find the next center sort of a thing for Corey Linsley after he left, but they kind of are. But Elton Jenkins has worked out amazing, and he can play literally anywhere on that offensive line. Myers struggled a little bit there as a rookie. John Runyon played very, very well, but there's a big hole at right guard. At right guard, there's a big hole on this team. So, you draft Tyler Linderbaum, you move Myers over to right guard. Realistically, I guess you could have an open competition between Linderbaum and Myers, but I think Linderbaum is the guy at center. You kick Myers over to right guard, and there you go. Your offensive line is actually in a pretty good spot so long as David Bakhtiari is fully healthy, and that they absolutely have to invest in this offensive line. I know that you guys the Packers fans want a wide receiver. They do have another pick coming up and a couple picks here, so see what we do there, and they are going to have to address that offense, but this is part of it. This is absolutely part of it, and they're going to have to run the ball a little more than they did last year, which was quite a bit, but they're going to have to run it even more with Devontae Adams out of town, and you have two absolute weapons at the running back position. So that's what I think makes the most sense for this team to continue winning and hopefully get back to the Super Bowl and get a win in the Super Bowl. With the way that defense played last year, there's no reason to think that they can't win this division, cruise to this division. I think the Vikings will give them some trouble, but they can very well win this division and potentially push to be the Super Bowl representative, the NFC, and the NFC is fairly weak this year. So they just got to shore up that offensive line a little bit, maybe get a weapon in a couple picks here, and then get yourself back to the Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers again. So there you go. 22 overall, the Green Bay Packers select Tyler Linderbaum from Iowa. At 23rd overall, the Arizona Cardinals select Jermaine Johnson II from Florida State, defensive end, edge rusher, outside linebacker, whatever you want to call him. He'll play edge rusher for this team. Obviously, he just fills in for Chandler Jones. It's a easy kind of substitute. Obviously, he's probably not quite where Chandler Jones is in his career, I'm sure. But there's no reason to think he can't get there. Talking about favorite players, this is my favorite edge rusher and favorite pass rusher in this entire draft. He might be my favorite defensive player in the entire draft. Sauce Gardner's right there as well, but this guy I absolutely love, and this is him falling. This is absolutely him falling. His over-under is 9.5. So there's realistically he shouldn't be here at this point in the draft. I just couldn't find anyone else that was going to go ahead and grab him. Maybe the Baltimore Ravens. They definitely are a contender, but I think they want to shore up the middle with Tyus Bowser. Odafe Owe was a former first round pick last year, so he could go there, but realistically, I think this is a dream landing spot for both the player and the team. Does it happen? I'm not really sure. Like I said, this is absolutely him falling, and I'm not trying to hate on Jermaine Johnson. He's literally my favorite edge rusher in this entire draft. I think he's going to absolutely have a fantastic career. Former Last Chance U alum. Shout out Coach JB. So, there's no reason to think that he can't be a very successful NFL player given the right system. I think that this is the right system. So is the Green Bay Packers, Baltimore Ravens, teams like that. There's other fits for him, and they pick before this team does, but it just is kind of how it worked out to me. And I don't think he'll actually be here. I couldn't put it together for any other team until it landed right here. So there you go. 23rd overall, Jermaine Johnson from Florida State. 24th overall, the Dallas Cowboys select Zion Johnson, offensive guard, offensive lineman, really, from Boston College. So I say offensive line. This kid played some left tackle for this team. So, he's got some versatility there. I think he even did a little bit at center, not in games, but in practices, workouts, and stuff like that. He did a little center work. So I think he can move around the offensive line if need be, if injuries should occur. And really, realistically, there's a huge hole at left guard right now for the Dallas Cowboys where Connor Williams once was. So I think that they have to address that offensive line, regardless of if this is the pick or not. I think they would probably rather a proper left tackle, but realistically, those guys just go ahead of him. And then this is the best offensive lineman at this point in the draft, and it's not close whatsoever. This might be him falling a little bit in the draft, to be honest with you. He's going to plug and play start 100% from day one at left guard for the Dallas Cowboys. And, I talked about it in the team needs build-up. Go watch the Dallas Cowboys team needs episode. They cannot neglect this offensive line. This is the least sexy pick you could probably have, but it's going to pay dividends for this offense immediately. Literally starting from day one, this is going to make Dak Prescott's life easier. Ezekiel Elliott, Tony Pollard, all of that. So this is going to help this team more than any other pick. Again, not sexy whatsoever, but it's going to help this team immediately. So there you go. At 24th overall, the Dallas Cowboys select guard Zion Johnson. 25th overall, the Buffalo Bills select Andrew Booth Jr., cornerback from Clemson. So this is like a no-brainer. They have to take some sort of corner. Kyler Gordon's there as well. They could take him from Washington, but Kahir Elam maybe. But this is the guy that I think that they go with. I think that he's the most pro-ready right now, and they absolutely have to address corner. Obviously, look what happened to them in 13 seconds with the Chiefs last year. I don't need to remind Buffalo Bills fans, what happened there. You have to address the back end of this defense, especially with losing Levi Wallace and Tre'Davious White just had ACL surgery. You have to address the back end of this defense, period. They did nothing but address the defensive line in previous drafts, so now it's time to kick it back. Your offense is still in a great place, obviously. Go ahead and grab a cornerback that could start right away. Obviously when Tre'Davious White comes back, he's going to be a guy as well, but you need that other guy here, and Dane Jackson just ain't it, man. You have to, especially with where the AFC is at, and like I said, in that Chiefs game, that was an absolute heartbreaker, and you can't afford for things like that to happen to your team. You just cannot. Leslie Frazier is a fantastic defensive coach. He'll get this kid up to speed right away and be ready to start from day one. So there you go. 25th overall, Buffalo Bills grab Andrew Booth from Clemson. All right, we're going to spend some time on this one. This is the big one here. So there's your trade right there. The San Francisco 49ers trade Deebo Samuel to the Tennessee Titans. Yes, I haven't heard that from anyone else or anywhere else. And I'm going to walk you through how I got here. It was, it's going to take some time on this one a little bit. It was a lot of looking around to see what happens here. The Jets, obviously, let's trade him here, blah, blah, blah. Let's dig into it. So obviously, there's reports out there that the Jets want to trade their 2 second-round picks, 35th and 38th or something, and their third-round pick for Deebo Samuel. I think the 49ers, or sorry, the Titans pick up the phone and say, hey, let's look at the Tyreek Hill trade. What did they get for Tyreek Hill? Okay, here you go. You can have our 26 overall. You can have our 4th round pick this year, one of 2. You can have a 2nd round pick next year. They already have quite a bit of capitals in the later rounds, 2nd, 3rd rounds, the 49ers I'm talking about. So it's like, hey, take our 2nd round pick next year and a 4th next year. Plus, this is the big difference maker in the trade between the Jets and the Titans here. This is the big thing, obviously. Robert Woods will throw in, what did you just trade for him, Tennessee Titans? A 6th round pick. You take this trade right here, you substitute Robert Woods for a 6th round pick, and that's exactly what was traded for Tyreek Hill. I think it makes tons of sense. He wants to play a little closer to home. There's been that thrown out there. Deebo wants to play a little closer to home. He's from South Carolina. Nashville is about a 5-hour drive from his hometown in South Carolina. AJ Brown, obviously connections there, same agent, they're buddies. Oh, you're going to have to pay Deebo and AJ Brown. You can't do that. Why not? Why can't you? You're freeing up $10 million, zero dead cap to trade Robert Woods. You're freeing up $10 million. You give them both an identical contract. Hey, AAV, 25 million, you back end load it, you kick it down the road a little bit. This is a Super Bowl team. If they add Deebo Samuel, this was the best team in the AFC. I'm talking about the Titans right here. This is the best team in the AFC last year, the number 1 seed, the first round bye. Where did they lack against the Bengals? They scored 16 points. I'm a Bengals fan. I obviously watched that game very intently. They were struggling on offense, not only in that game, but towards the end of once basically Derrick Henry went down. Hey, Deebo Samuel, you don't like how you're being used. You don't want to run the ball into, other dudes' faces 100 miles an hour. We got a guy. We got the biggest guy in the league that's bigger, stronger, faster than every linebacker in the NFL. Don't worry about it. We'll use you as a wide receiver. We got your buddy A.J. Brown here as well. Boom. We have one of the best teams in the NFL. It sucks for Robert Woods, who kind of handpicked this team, but there's no way he's not going to, that's the other thing. California guy. Robert Woods is from LA. He loved going, obviously it was no brainer for him to sign with the Rams. I don't think he particularly really wanted to go to Tennessee. They gave him an option, trade him for a 6th-round pick. So they really respected and wanted to give him the option, and his ties to Todd Downing. So I get all that, but it's like, hey, sorry, man, we're going to send you home anyways. You're going to the San Francisco 49ers. You're not going to be out of place. We apologize for the confusion type of thing, but hey, we're going to get Deebo Samuel and hopefully go to the Super Bowl. That's just where it's at. It took a while to connect these dots for me, but it just makes the most sense. And the biggest difference between, you could maybe say I'd rather have the picks from the Jets, the 2 seconds and the 3rd. But this is a relatively weak draft. You're getting depth guys in the later 2nd, 3rd, 4th rounds, right? So why not get that 2nd round pick next year? You have 2 next year, right? They already have some depth, some capital later in the draft this year. Plus they get another 4th in this deal and another 4th next year. And you're getting a guy in Robert Woods that you can do a lot of the same things. There's a lot of similar things you could do that they did with Deebo Samuel. Robert Woods runs the ball a fair amount. He does a lot of similar things, not obviously the same way that Deebo can, but you could just substitute Robert Woods into a lot of those plays and not have to change up your playbook a ton from last year that clearly worked. So, he is coming off a torn ACL, but we're basically equating him to a 6th-round pick. He's obviously worth more than that in real life football. I think everybody would admit that. So I think the Niners are getting a hell of a deal here. I think they're getting a really good deal for a guy that does not want to be there, and he's going to go and be extremely happy in Tennessee. With these contracts of Deebo Samuel and AJ Brown, they're very flexible right now as far as the cap and what you can do to manipulate the cap. They're very, 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 very flexible, especially while Ryan Tannehill's contract still, got a fairly high cap hit, but only next season. It's only next year, and then they can move on from him if they want. I'm certainly not saying that they move on from Tannehill, especially with making these moves and stuff like that. But you cannot argue with me that this doesn't make complete sense, and it doesn't make the Titans one of the best teams in the NFL, Super Bowl ready, and there you go, man. Everybody's happy. Bob's your uncle. So that's what I think happens with this trade, and that's my rationale. Let me know what you think in the comments, because obviously this is a big one, and if I'm right, I'm going to look like a genius. So there you go. As far as the pick, the San Francisco 49ers, they get 26 overall. I know they like Jaquan Brisker. They're going to want to add to the back end of that defense. I'm very certain of that. That's the only weak spot of the defense. They're getting some depth. They're getting an NFL wide receiver back, so that, alleviates that need a little bit with losing Deebo Samuel. And then they can get another piece or two later in the draft at the wide receiver position, maybe a running back as well. So there you go. That's what I think they do. It's an interesting trade. I think it makes tons of sense. I'm hoping it happens. I'll look very smart if it does. Let me know what you think in the comments. But 26 overall, the San Francisco 49ers select Jaquan Brisker from Penn State. 27th overall, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Perion Winfrey, defensive lineman from Oklahoma. So it's a little less spicy than the previous selection, obviously, with the trade there. But this makes tons of sense for this team. You know, they have to invest in this defense again. It doesn't look like Ndamukong Suh's coming back. Vita Vea is obviously still there. They have some depth at the outside linebacker position. They could address that. They definitely could address outside linebacker, edge rusher, whatever it is. But I think that they go with the defensive line and add a guy who was the MVP of the Senior Bowl. You know, he had 2 sacks. He looked great. He was great in practice. And I think he fits right into this defense from day one. I think he can start from day one, take over from where Ndamukong Suh left off last year. And then this defense doesn't really miss a beat. I mean, you know, it's obviously not going to be quite as good. And maybe they still bring back Suh. And that would be fine for a guy like Winfrey, obviously, to learn from a guy like that and, you know, emulate what he can do and everything. So, you know, I think that he helps in the run game. He helps with the getting after the quarterback, which is massive in today's NFL. You know, he's going to lend a hand to those outside rushers, getting after the quarterback, like I was kind of alluding to there. So, yeah, I think it's a set and forget. Pretty easy pick, to be honest with you. I think it makes a lot of sense. I know they met with him, everything like that. So let me know what you think about this one. But 27th overall, Perion Winfrey from Oklahoma. At 28th overall, the Green Bay Packers are on the clock again, and they select wide receiver George Pickens from Georgia. So there you go, Packers fans. Hopefully we're friends again. They're going to get a weapon, I hope, and it should be in the first round, and this is a very, very good option for them. I know they like them. They're connected, everything like that. And the beauty of where the Packers are picking in this year's draft with the 2 first round selections there is they're both ahead of the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think with selecting Tyler Linderbaum early, you know, that is a bit of a risky proposition because you're basically daring them to move up and select this guy before you have a chance to pick. But, you know, at the end of the day, there's not a ton of picks there. And are any of those teams going to want to move down to pick, you know, and maybe miss out on their guy? I don't know. I don't know about that. You know, it might be a risky game, you know, not selecting George Pickens at 22, but then do you lose Tyler Linderbaum and then where do you go, sort of a thing. So I'm okay with them, you know, playing a little bit of roulette here and daring the Chiefs to move up ahead of them to grab Pickens. But at the end of the day, you know, I think he ends up where he's supposed to go. And this could be the guy that, you know, this very well could be the number 1 wide receiver in this draft class. Like, you know, his stats aren't there. I know all of that stuff, but there's no reason to think, if you watch tape on this guy and you know what he can do, there's no reason to think that with Aaron Rodgers and that revamped offensive line bringing in Linderbaum, that this kid can end up being the number 1 wide receiver in this draft. And to be honest, I think if this does happen this way, he's the 101, you know, potentially in a lot of rookie drafts, you know, 101, 102 at the latest. You know, he instantly walks in and is the wide receiver 1. I do still like Allen Lazard there, but I would like George Pickens more, absolutely, in that offense. And it makes tons of sense. Like I said, they're connected. So hopefully it works out this way for the Packers. Like I said, it's a bit of a dangerous game, but it's a risk worth taking in my opinion. So there you go. At 28, they get their weapon that they need, George Pickens, wide receiver from Georgia. The first of 2 picks in a row for the Kansas City Chiefs at 29th overall. We got Kyler Gordon, cornerback from Washington. So I think that, like I just talked about with the Packers kind of daring them to move up, I think the Chiefs will just say, hey, look, like we got a lot of needs here, guys. Let's just get 2 quality players, very quality players. Then we got to shore up this defense. You know, look at what happened in the playoffs last year. Like, even though they ended up beating the Buffalo Bills, that's pretty unacceptable what happened there on the final couple drives there. People just kind of scored at will on this team. So, and they lost some players. They lost Tyrann Mathieu. They lost Charvarius Ward. They're going to have to address this defense. And I think that they do that with 29 and potentially 30. We'll get there in a second. But I just think that, you know, like I said, the Packers are going to kind of dare them to move up. and get that weapon. Do they really need another wide receiver? I don't know. I don't know if they need one that much that they have to sink assets in to move up to get them. I think that there's tons of depth later on in the draft. They have a lot of capital. They could grab a wide receiver that they believe in the second or third round, to be honest with you. And realistically, with this offense, what's the difference between George Pickens and Alec Pierce? Maybe a ton, but realistically, maybe not, with what's already there and with what they do and how they can spread around the ball and having the quarterback that you have. Is that going to be a huge difference on this offense this season? Maybe it would be more so moving forward. Obviously, I just was singing George Pickens' praises, but I think at the end of the day, it's not worth it to sink in assets to move up. As it sits right now, obviously hindsight is 2020, and in 3 years, maybe I'm completely wrong here, but maybe I'm completely right. So, I think they stand pat and they just draft two quality, yes, I'll give it away, two quality defensive players back to back and help this team on the defensive side of the football where they absolutely, without question, need the most help on this team, and it's not even close whatsoever. So there you go, 29th overall. We'll get to their 30th selection in a second. They grab cornerback Kyler Gordon. With the 30th selection, the second to two, back-to-back picks, the Kansas City Chiefs select defensive end Boye Mafe from Minnesota. So like I said, I think that it's just not worth it. We have too many needs, especially on the defensive side of the ball, if we're talking about the Chiefs, and we have to address that, and we have to get after the quarterback. Chris Jones has been, kicked to the outside way too often, just out of necessity, because other guys haven't been able to get the job done. And this kid comes in there and helps out with that. So you add to the back end and to the defensive line of this defense, you help that essentially will help your offense. It really, really will. And they don't need help. They don't really need help on the offensive side of the ball. MBS is still there. Mecole Hardman's been improving. Travis Kelce's obviously the mainstay and kind of the focal point of this offense. And then again, like I said a second ago, they can add some playmakers later on in the draft. If they get a guy like Alec Pierce, there's a bunch of good wide receivers in this draft that they can get later on that can do a lot of good things that'll help this team. There's a lot of quality depth in this draft. They don't need to invest assets to move up and grab a wide receiver. They should do what I'm saying here and just grab. I don't care if it's these two guys or not. These guys make tons of sense, but they need to address that defense, especially the back end. Even if they grab two corners here, Kahir Elam, grab him as well. I don't really care. They have to address this defense. And in my opinion, with what's left on the board, this is the best way to do it. So there you go. 30th overall, the Chiefs go ahead and grab a pass rusher in Boye Mafe. The 31st overall selection, my team, my Cincinnati Bengals select Logan Hall, defensive lineman from Houston. I think he does kick inside and is a defensive tackle. If you watch the draft needs build up for the Cincinnati Bengals episode that I did, I think it's very, very important for them to replace Larry Ogunjobi, who they were without in the Super Bowl. So that would be a big addition here, I think. I do like BJ Hill a ton. I really, really do. But you got DJ Reader and Tyler Shelvin. That's fantastic. The outside rushers are in a good spot. Hubbard, Hendrickson, Joseph Osai is back. Cam Sample was decent last year. And then you get a guy like this who's actually pretty versatile, and he could play defensive end as well if you really, in some sets, you can do some creative things, with a guy like this. You really can. So I think he kicks inside, whether he starts or backs up BJ Hill, either way, he's going to play in a rotational basis. And like I said, it adds a little different element to this defensive line and a little bit of versatility. This is a guy that I really think is going to be, is kind of underrated in this kind of draft conversation, in mock draft draft conversations. There are some people that I've seen have him be a first round pick, and I think that he's definitely, worth taking a shot on here at 31. There's some other guys as well that may have some issues, off the field issues. There's a couple guys in particular, but I say you go with a relatively safe bet and a guy that, likes to play in the interior. He might be a better fit in a 3-4, but I think that you can move him around. I really think you can move him around. That's what I like the most about Logan Hall, is the versatility that he'll be able to bring to a creative play caller. And I do think that Lou Anarumo is that guy. He relies on the front four getting after the quarterback, and I think that this kid can absolutely get the job done. So I think he plays a relatively prominent role early for this team, at the very least a rotational basis. BJ Hill and Larry Ogunjobi both had quality stat line for this team. They both played quality snaps for this team, and I think that Logan Hall can go in there and this team doesn't miss a beat. And it might not be sexy at all, but hey, those sexy, unsexy draft picks are the ones that are going to win you Super Bowls, and I think that this is one that's going to help them do that. So there you go. That's what I do if I'm the Bengals. At 31st overall, I grab Logan Hall, defensive tackle out of Houston. With the final 32nd overall selection in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Kenny Pickett, quarterback from Pittsburgh. So I think that this is a little late for Kenny Pickett, if I'm being honest. We could see a team trade up and grab him. As I've said, and I'll say it again right here, I do think that Kenny Pickett is the most ready to start an NFL game, out of the quarterback class this year. I think that if there was an NFL game tomorrow, and I had to pick one of these quarterbacks to start the game, I'm picking Kenny Pickett. And the same thing happened in the Senior Bowl, and he played very, very well in the Senior Bowl that the Detroit Lions were a part of. He was not on the Detroit Lions roster, but that doesn't mean that you're not talking to the kid, getting to know him a little bit. That's for sure. So I'm sure that they got to know him a little bit. They obviously met with him through the draft process as well. I was kind of struggling between Matt Corral and Kenny Pickett here, but And Matt Corral's ceiling might be higher than Pickett's. That's, I think, very certain. I honestly think that realistically, Kenny Pickett is at his ceiling. More or less. You might get a little more out of him, but he's more or less at his ceiling right now. But he's also the highest floor for sure. So, you get that fifth-year option. You have Jared Goff there already right now, who struggled to stay healthy a little bit last year. So you get a kid that can step in and play quarterback for your team this year. Look at what they look like with Tim Boyle starting. It was not pretty whatsoever. So you can get a kid right here who comes in as your backup quarterback, and you have an open competition, and he just might win it. He just might end up being the day one, week one starter for the Detroit Lions if they make this draft pick. Whereas Matt Corral, I'm not comfortable starting him in an NFL game, at least not this year. You could have him sit a full season, whatever. But, with Kenny Pickett, he could win that job, and he could still be, just because he's at his ceiling, he had a very good year last year, in college. Just because he's at his ceiling now doesn't mean that he can't be a quality NFL starter. There's a very good offensive line in Detroit. They added a weapon in DJ Chark. Hopefully TJ Hawkinson's healthy. They got a good slot receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown, so there's weapons there. This is not as bad of a team as people think. And if they get a guy like Sauce Gardner at 2nd overall and their future quarterback here, which is entirely possible, and then, there's no harm, no foul if they want to move on from him. Again, they have that 5th-year option. He's not going to be crazy expensive because he's the 32nd overall selection, but having that 5th-year option is going to be really helpful in seeing, where they go with the quarterback position. Jared Goff is not the answer long term. Maybe Kenny Pickett is, but also maybe he's not, and that's not the end of the world either. So there you go. There's the draft, guys. That's it. There wasn't a lot of trades this year. I didn't see a lot of action, but draft day trades, because there was a ton of trades. There's a lot of draft picks that changed hands here. There's a lot of teams that have 2 draft picks, stuff like that. A couple trades in the mock draft here, and that's it. Let me know what you think in the comments there. I really appreciate it. I put in a ton of work for this thing, so I appreciate the watch. Hopefully you watch to the end. Let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button. If you see something you agree with or don't, send it to your friends. I'd love to keep building this out here, so I need your guys' help to get me there, sort of thing. So there you go. And like we always say with Off the Schneid, if you're afraid to be wrong, you'll never be right.